What up, YouTube? This is Steven, and welcome back to another video. Alright, in this video, a YouTube user posted a comment and asked me a question in the comment and just wanted to get my opinion on this particular topic, right? And also the YouTube user had, asked or hinted at getting a shout out. That's the first time that has happened, a specific request for a shout out. So, let's do it. All right. So this was requested by Kenneth W. All right. YouTube user Kenneth W. So this shout out is for you. Thanks for posting and asking and posing this question. However, I do think that this topic in general, should this even be a topic, in the sense that should we really be having this discussion? I kind of thought it was obvious that East African people are black, right? Just the different variation of blackness, right? But I'm guessing perhaps they're talking about East African people who perhaps maybe have lighter skin, and I guess have the look of the musical artist The Weeknd. I think that's a really good example I can use as far as a media example, right? Because when I saw the Weeknd for the first time, I thought he was like, mixed. I thought he had like maybe a black parent and a white parent, right? Or something like that. Perhaps a black parent and a Middle Eastern parent or something like that. But I think he has two parents who identify as Ethiopian, right? So I think it's like, oh, okay. But I think for us, we have a certain vision of what blackness is, especially in the community. And I think we're so like protective of, I guess at this particular point in time, we're like really seem to be clinging on to an identity that we want to have, or trying to, I guess, find and define what is black and what is not black, right? And it seems like these conversations always seem to circle back around to that question: who is black? And ultimately, these are imagined communities, right? These are social constructs, right? I'm not saying that they don't exist or that they don't matter, but I'm saying like we ultimately create the idea, right, and the standard, right? So when it comes to topics like these, black people can sometimes annoy me because we as a collective and as a group, I'm not sure if we know what we want, right? Because on one hand, if East African people came to the United States in mass numbers and did not claim a black identity, we would be feeling some type of a way about that. We would be looking at them with the side eye, right? Especially if they want to have a identity that is separate from our identity, right? We would be like, oh, y'all black, y'all black, y'all need to check the black box. You need to be, support black causes and black issues and et cetera, right? But on the other hand, it seems like some people are like, well, no, they're not black because they don't have really dark skin, really coarse hair, broad facial features, right? And I mean, I guess, but those are features that like West African people have, not all African people on the continent. Because if you compare like a South African to a West African to a North African to an East African to a Central African, etc., they're going to have different looks, right? They're not going to have point blank the same features, right? And there are, like, you have like the Khoisan, who are 100% African, but they do tend to have like a lighter skin tone, right? um, and I think I've heard this topic come up, right? What are black features, right? I think Chrissy did a video about this very recently. What are black features, right? And I know she was upset at black people for like not wanting to really define what are black features, right? And I think in Chrissy's case, I can understand where she's upset because she's talking about a specific group, African Americans, thus of West African origin, right? Those features can be defined a lot more, like, you know, specifically to the point, right? But I think African features in general, right, vary, right? And keep it real. I even heard, scientifically speaking, right? I've heard this. It was said in one of my like biological anthropology classes, right? They said some teacher said something to the extent of like, say if humanity, like, say if every life on every continent except for Africa was wiped out, right? Except Africa, we would be able to get back every single person, every single group of people. If Africa survives, we can get back, the Asian people. We can get back the, you know, East Indian people, the Aboriginals, the Native Americans, et cetera, right? We can get back the entire the rest of the human race and all its variations, right? If Africa survives, that can happen. It'll take, millions of years to happen probably, but we will still be able to get them back, right? And I think that just goes to say that when it comes to African features, as well when it comes to Asian features, when it comes to Caucasian white people's features, they're not point blank all the same. There's variations in all different groups. Whether we're talking about variation just because of um, maybe admixture, but not even admixtures and mixes. These variations oftentimes, a lot of the times, are not necessarily because of an admixture. You know, like, all Asian people don't have the same features. There's some dark skinned Asians, there's some light skinned Asians. There's actually Asians who have curly, thick hair. Believe it or not, I didn't know that until recently. But yeah, that's why they have like a Japanese perm, or like a Japanese thermal perm, or a Korean perm for Asians who have curly hair, right? Oftentimes when we think of Asian people, we think of straight hair, but that's not always the case, right? Variations in features, right? Um, yeah, with Caucasian people, with white people, uh, not every white person is blonde hair, has blonde hair and blue eyes. Right? Some white people actually do have like a skin tone to them, right? Some white people have curly hair. White people have different color eyes, different color hair color, right? Again, so if we're talking about blackness as in the whole African diaspora, we can't narrow it down to just a particular set of features per se. I mean, we can, but there's different variations. We're not going to all fit into the box, right? A few people will, but we're not all going to fit into this box, right? If we're saying, oh well, in order to be black, you need to have this, that, other, right? And as well, I don't like when it comes to black people. Like take Cape, let's take Cape Verdeans for example. When they come to the United States, especially, they I've heard they don't claim a black identity. Some black people feel some type of a way about that. But aren't we the same people saying blackness is this, 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 and this? And they're like, well, I don't fit into that. That's not what black is. That's the thing. We don't know what we want as a collective. We don't. We do the same thing with like people who are like biracial too. We we don't know what we want. We need to figure out what we want first, you know. As well, we do need to have standards for what is black, right? But I feel like, in my personal opinion, right, the way I define blackness is having at least one black parent within the first generation. I would think that to me is one black parent who is majority black, right? Around like 75% at least black, right? At least for African Americans. I would think that person would be allowed to claim a black identity, right? But then it's like, well, not all people want to claim a black identity, right? Then we get mad at that because they don't want to claim it. But then on the flip side, we're like, well, I don't claim them, etc. But this is a very confusing, very nuanced topic. But the way I see it, if they're from Africa and they are like indigenous to the land, right? Not like, white people who, colonized the place, but like indigenous folk, right? Indigenous sub-Saharan African. Yes, they would be black, just a different variation of blackness, but yeah, they would be black. Um, as far as us in the United States, um, how do we define blackness? Because at one point we were just like one drop of black and you're black. But I think we're trying to move away from that rule, which is good, which it needs to happen. But I don't know exactly where we're moving to and what we want. But as Christy does bring up, we know blackness definitely when we're looking at someone who is perhaps mixed race or racially ambiguous. We know how to spot the blackness in that person, right? I mean, not to be self-centered or anything, but take me for instance. If you're looking at me, what race do you think that I am? What race do you think that I'm a part of? And what makes you jump to that conclusion, right? Because let's be real. If I was up here and I was like, bashing black people and not claiming a black identity, be like, I ain't black. Y'all would be like, y'all. That's when folks really want to pop up and start defining black features, right? When folks be trying to, distance themselves from the blackness and run away from the blackness. Like, wait a minute, now. I see the black in you, That's when folks really want to jump up, But in terms of, I guess, what's black features and what's not black features, I say we know it when we see it. I think for us, I think when it comes to West African features, we definitely know those. But when it comes to East African and other African features, we don't know those because that's not the features that we have, right? So I think we as a collective in the United States are just a little ignorant about the variations of blackness. Blackness, just like other racial groups, it has variation. It's not just one particular look. So I think if you want a particular look of African, that is fine to want a particular look. But I think to try and just define blackness and Africanness as just one particular thing, it won't work. We can't define, I guess, can we really define Asianness as one particular thing? Or whiteness as one particular thing? There's variation, right? There's variation. Perhaps we can have a particular look that is synonymous and that represents blackness, like how we have blonde hair, blue eyes that represent whiteness. We can have something like that. But I think as far as African and blackness across the board, we're not going to be able to just pinpoint it to one particular look. But if we're just talking about West African people or a particular set of African people in general, then we can pinpoint it to a look, right? There's variations within those groups, but still, we could probably pinpoint it to a look when we talk about particular groups, right? Like, oh, this East African person tend to have features like this, while this West African person tends to have features like this. While, like, oh, this Italian person has features like this versus this Russian person has features like this versus this English person who has features like this, right? We can do something like that. But I think that it's not going to work, We know what blackness is when we see it. Let's be real, we do. And I think that's what it's going to come down to. We know blackness when people trying to deny blackness, right? We know blackness when people try to pass themselves off as black and like, wait a minute, you ain't black. Rachel Dolezal. But yeah, East African people are black. I think when it comes to North Africans, I think those are more like the Middle Eastern Africans who I guess I refer to them as like Middle Eastern or Arabic, I guess I just tend to say Middle Eastern, right? And there may be some like mixture going on there that has happened over the course of like centuries and maybe even millennia. But usually when we talk about Africanness, we usually talk about like sub-Saharan Africa more so, right? Like a sub-Saharan African versus a North African, which would be more the Middle Eastern kind. I'm not really including them in it because that's when it will really get complicated. And besides, they don't claim that identity, right? As they should, right? So, long story short, blackness has different variations. It's not just one particular look, right? If we want one particular look, we need to concentrate on one particular people, all right? If we want different variations of blackness, that's okay too. That can happen, and it's nothing wrong with the variation. We are a very diverse group of people, so we're going to have variation, right? Just in Africa, without admixture alone, there's variation, let alone if you were to add admixture, folks, to the equation, it does get even more complicated, right? So, blackness really, I know this, I saw Chrissy's video. I know what I'm saying might kind of be like pissing her off a little bit. It's not meant to be, but because I know she did mention this in the video and made a good point about it. But, ultimately, black features kind of probably are the most diverse of all the features in the world, like of all other groups' features, right? We have the features that ultimately led to them coming into the existence, right? And of course, her argument was a valid one, where it's like, well, if blackness is just everything, then who can, like, should we even be complaining? It's like everyone's black, everyone's but It's a complicated topic, but I'm going to bring this video to a close. Long story short, East African people are black. All right, they're black. Just because they don't look like West African people don't mean that they're not black, right? You know, it's just a different variation, right? That's all. It's just a different variation of blackness. Just like if we had kids, just because our kids may not look exactly like us doesn't mean that they're not our kids. They just are a different variation, right? Some kids tend to look like their mom. Some kids tend to look like their father. Some kids look like a mixture of both their mom and their father. Some kids kind of just come out looking very random. It happens, you know. It doesn't mean that they're not the kid and that their parents aren't their parents. It's just the way that the genes work for them. Oh yeah. So thanks a lot for watching, and thanks a lot for the video requests, Kenneth W. I hope I was able to answer your question. I know this was like a long video, longer than I intended this video to be. And as well, I was kind of all over the place, but this topic is very nuanced. But, you know, I gave my straightforward answer at the end. So hopefully you were able to get it. So thanks for watching. Adios and goodbye for now.